What if Naruto Uzumaki became the reincarnation of Zamasu, the god who hated mortals? Born into a broken world filled with war and corruption, Naruto does not seek love or recognition. He sees humanity for what it truly is: flawed, violent, and unworthy. With the power of fused Zamasu flowing through him, Naruto rises beyond chakra and beyond humanity itself. This is not the story of a hero. This is the beginning of divine judgment.
He fell through the fabric of dimensions, through the space between worlds, through the dark and the silence, until it found something warm. Something small, something new, a child not yet born, curled in the dark of his mother's womb. The fragment of Zamasu did not choose this. There was no choice left to make. It simply latched onto the only light available, the only vessel capable of holding even a fraction of divine energy, because the child had something no other living thing in that world possessed. Something old, something that hummed with a frequency that felt, just barely, like home. The child's mother was Kushina Uzumaki, the last of a dying clan, a woman whose chakra was not ordinary by any definition. The Uzumaki were descendants of the sage of six paths himself, their life force unnaturally powerful, their chakra dense with something ancient and unkillable. Chakra, that invisible energy that flowed through every living being in this strange world. It was not ki. It was not the divine energy Zamasu had wielded like a scalpel for as long as he had existed. But it was close enough for a dying fragment of consciousness to grab hold of and refuse to let go. And so the soul of a god was reborn inside the son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. The village of Konoha was burning when Naruto came into the world. Not in the way villages usually burn, with enemy torches and siege weapons and the screaming of soldiers. It burned because something ancient and catastrophic had torn itself free. The nine-tailed fox, a creature of pure chakra and hatred so old and so deep it had become something close to elemental, had been ripped from the seal within Kushina by a masked man with a grudge older than most bloodlines. The beast's chakra alone was enough to uproot trees and flatten stone. When it moved, the earth cracked. When it roared, men lost their hearing. Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, the man they called the Yellow Flash of Konoha for the speed with which he could move through space itself using his own technique, arrived in time to see his village bleeding. He made a choice that night, the kind of choice that ends quietly, in a way the person making it never fully says out loud but carries in every motion from the moment it is made. He would seal the nine tails inside his newborn son. He would use a technique called the Dead Demon Consuming Seal, which did exactly what its name promised. He would divide the beast's power, sealing its young half, its living energy, its raw destructive force, inside the child. And he would pay for it with his own soul. Kushina held their son while the sealing was prepared. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she spoke to him, telling him things she would never get to say again. The kind of things parents say when they realize they are saying them for the last time. Be strong, be kind, make friends who believe in you. Live a life that means something. The child did not cry. This was the first thing that felt wrong. Every person present for the sealing, every Ambu operative standing guard, every medic who had come for Kushina would later agree on this one detail. The child did not cry. He opened his eyes, and they were blue, startlingly blue, and they were calm. Not the blank calm of a newborn still adjusting to a world of light and sound and sensation. Something older than that. He looked at his mother's face with an expression that had no business being on a newborn at all. Kushina smiled at him despite the tears on her own face. She told him his name, Naruto. He looked at her the way someone looks at something they have already categorized and filed away. Not without recognition, but without surprise, the nine tails was sealed into him moments before his parents were taken by the very forces they had struggled to contain. Kushina spent her last reserves of strength pinning the fox's chakra down while Minato completed the sealing. Then they were gone, both of them. Within the same hour the child came into the world. The Hokage left instructions. The child was to be seen as a hero, as the vessel that contained the thing that had nearly destroyed them all. He wanted people to understand what had been sacrificed, what had been given so that they could keep breathing. They did not understand. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, buried the truth of Naruto's parentage. It was protection, he said. If Naruto was known to be the son of the fourth Hokage, enemies of the village would target him. The child would grow up as Naruto Uzumaki, his mother's name his only inheritance, his father's face on the stone monument above the village. staring down at a son who would not know for years what he was looking at. The villagers knew only this: the boy had the 9 tails inside him. And most of them never learned to separate the container from what it contained. Naruto's earliest memories were not of loneliness, at least not in the way it would later be described by people who tried to explain him. He was placed in a small apartment on the edge of the village, far enough from the center that foot traffic was sparse. The building was old and the walls were thin, and the landlord's jaw tightened every time he had to acknowledge the child existed. The third Hokage arranged for money, for food, for the basic necessities of a life being kept alive out of obligation. Ninja came by periodically to check on him, assigned the duty the way people were assigned to unpleasant tasks, efficiently and without eye contact. Naruto learned to walk. He learned to talk. He learned the layout of his apartment well enough to move through it in the dark, which he often did, because he did not always turn the lights on. He would sit in the dark and be very, very still, and something inside him would quietly, methodically take stock of the world around him. He could feel things, not in the way that shinobi trained for years to sense chakra, that a faint awareness of energy in living bodies that required concentration and practice and usually the guidance of a teacher. Naruto felt it the way you feel the sun on your face when you walk outside. Effortless, total. He could feel the chakra signatures of the neighbors in the building next to his. Could feel the particular weight of the NBU operatives stationed on the roof, always the same one on Tuesday nights, whose chakra had the quality of someone who had learned to be invisible so thoroughly it had become a kind of loneliness. He could feel the immense, chained, churning mass of something at his own center. Something he understood instinctively was not him, not fully. Something that breathed in a rhythm different from his own and dreamed in colors that had no names in any human language. He did not tell anyone about this. This was not a conscious decision at first. He simply noticed, very early, that the adults who came to check on him preferred when he behaved in predictable ways. Cried when he was hungry, smiled when they gave him something, reached for things the way children were supposed to reach for things. When he did these things, the tension in the room dropped slightly. When he sat still and watched them with his blue eyes and said nothing, their chocolate signatures spiked with something that was not quite fear but lived in the same neighborhood. So he learned to perform, not deceitfully, not at first. It was simply a form of observation translated into behavior. He watched how children were supposed to act, and he did those things when it was useful. And when he was alone, he returned to stillness and the quiet cataloging of a world that struck him, even then, as deeply, fundamentally flawed. He began to walk through the village when he was old enough to do so without being stopped, though he was stopped often enough. Shopkeepers who looked at him and then looked away. Adults who steered their children by the shoulder without explaining why. The butcher on the main street who never once met his eyes in 2 years of Naruto buying groceries there, who handed over the change at arm's length as though proximity was dangerous. Naruto watched all of this. He did not cry over it. He did not rage against it, did not throw himself at the walls of the village's silent rejection the way the other part of him, the part that was purely and entirely a small human child, sometimes wanted to. He filed it away. He observed it the way a scholar observes evidence that is building toward a conclusion he already suspects. Mortals, said something deep and old inside him, quiet as a stone at the bottom of still water. Just look at them. He was 4 years old the first time he wandered into the memorial grounds at the edge of the administrative district, the section of the village where the stone faces of the past Hokage looked out from the mountainside. He stood in front of the fourth's face for a very long time. He did not know yet that this was his father, but there was something in the face that pulled at him, something in the shape of the jaw and the way the stone artist had chosen to carve the eyes that made him stand still longer than he planned to. He left without understanding why he had come. He came back the next week, and the week after that. By the time he was 5, he had developed the habit of sitting under the third Hokage's window at dusk, on a particular bench in a particular part of the garden where the old man sometimes walked in the evenings. Not to speak to him, not to beg attention or affirmation. To observe, to watch the way the third carried the weight of the village in his shoulders, the constant low-grade exhaustion of a man holding too many things at once. The third noticed him on the third occasion and stopped. He looked down at the small blonde child on the bench and his expression did something complicated. "You come here often," the old man said. Naruto looked up at him. "The light is good here in the evening," he said. The third Hokage blinked. Then he laughed, a short surprised sound, and sat down on the other end of the bench and said nothing more for a while. Eventually, he asked if Naruto was eating enough and Naruto said yes, and they sat in silence until the light faded and the old man went back inside and Naruto walked home in the dark. He felt the old man's chakra the entire way, watching from the window. There was a sadness in it that Naruto could feel like a pressure behind his eyes. The kind of sadness that came from decisions made long ago that could not be undone, that had grown roots into everything surrounding them. Naruto understood this, in the wordless way he understood most things. The third Hokage looked at him and felt guilty. Everyone who knew what he was felt guilty. Even the people who hated him had built their hatred on a foundation of grief. The grief of the Nine Tails attack. The grief of the people they had lost that night. Grief that had curdled into something easier to carry. Grief was, in the end, the same as every other mortal failing. It turned inward. It became armor. It made people cruel in ways they never had to examine because the cruelty was wrapped in something that felt like pain, and pain felt like justification. He walked home. He turned the lights off and sat in the dark. The chakra of the Nine Tails pulsed at his center like a second heartbeat, ancient and furious and patient, and Naruto sat very still and listened and thought about what he had seen, and slowly, without drama, without the urgency of revelation, drew a conclusion. He had come into this world from somewhere very far away. He did not have words for where, not yet, because the memories were not accessible to him in the way memories usually are, not stored in language and image but in something more fundamental, a deep knowing that sat below thought. He had existed before this. He had existed as something immense and certain and righteous, and he had been taken from that existence, scattered, and found himself here, in this small body, in this small village, in this world where the people who were supposed to protect children could not look a 5-year-old in the eye. He sat with this knowledge. He did not rage. He simply understood, in the way that gods understand things when they bother to be patient, that he was in the right place. That there was a reason for this. That the world he had been reborn into was presenting him with exactly the evidence he needed. And evidence, once gathered, could not be unread. Outside his window, Konoha moved and breathed and went about the business of being a human settlement full of human failings, and the child who was not entirely human sat in the dark with the Nine Tails breathing inside him like a second consciousness and waited, with the particular patience of something that has always known. Eventually, it would be the last one standing. Time skip. The academy smelled like chalk and old wood and the particular anxiety of children who had not yet learned to hide it. Naruto arrived on his first day with his hair uncombed and his jacket slightly too big for him, both deliberate choices. He had spent the better part of a week observing the other children who would be in his class, watching them from corners and rooftops and the particular bench near the administrative building where nobody ever thought to look for a 6-year-old. He cataloged them the way he cataloged everything. Their chakra signatures, their habits, the way they held themselves when they thought no one was watching versus the careful performances they constructed for adults. He understood, before he ever sat in a classroom, that this place was not designed to teach him anything he did not already know. But it was necessary, and necessary things he had learned were worth the patience they required. So he chose a performance, not entirely unlike the ones he had seen other children craft for parents and teachers and the general audience of adult expectation. He would be loud, occasionally. He would struggle with things in visible, traceable ways. He would fail the clone jutsu, which required precise chakra splitting and control, because any instructor paying attention would find it strange for a child with his reserves to master it immediately. The Nine Tails chakra inside him was immense enough that even passively bleeding through the seal it made fine control difficult in ways that were entirely real, which made the performance easier. He simply let the natural difficulty be more visible than it needed to be. He also chose to be annoying, not cruel, not in ways that would invite serious scrutiny or draw the attention of people who might look at him too closely. Just loud enough, just obnoxious enough, to be categorized quickly and then largely ignored. It was a useful category to occupy. The class idiot was watched with exasperation, not curiosity. Exasperation asked no real questions. The instructors filed him in their minds as a problem student within the first month. Haruka Amino, who taught the class with a kind of genuine care that Naruto noticed and acknowledged privately, tried harder than the others. He would stay after class sometimes, attempting to reach the boy who kept failing basic exercises and pulling pranks that seemed almost calculated to frustrate rather than amuse. Naruto appreciated the effort in the way he appreciated most mortal gestures of decency. It confirmed that the capacity existed, somewhere. It simply never seemed to survive contact with the larger systems humans build around themselves. The other students were uninteresting in the ways that mattered. Sakura Haruno was intelligent and eager to perform that intelligence for audiences who would reward it. Kiba Inuzuka was noisy in ways he genuinely did not calculate, which Naruto found almost refreshing. Shikamaru Nara's chakra had a quality that was different from the others, slower and deeper, like water that ran far below the surface, and Naruto gave him slightly more attention than the rest, though he kept this invisible. And then there was Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto had known about Sasuke before the academy. The massacre of the Uchiha clan was not a secret in Konoha, not fully, the way nothing in a village of shinobi was ever fully secret. Naruto had pieced together enough from overheard conversations and the particular quality of grief that certain jonin carried when they thought they were alone. An entire clan killed in a single night by one of their own. A boy left alive, and everyone knew why, even if they spoke it in lowered voices. To suffer, to have something to chase. Sasuke's chakra was the most distinctive Naruto had encountered so far. Dense and cold and coiled very tightly around a core of something that burned. Grief dressed in ambition, a wound that had been carefully converted into a weapon. Naruto sat behind him in class and watched him the way he watched everything, cataloging, filing, noting. He understood Sasuke Uchiha perfectly. The boy had turned his pain into purpose, which was the most reliable thing mortals did with suffering that was too large to simply carry. He had constructed an entire identity around a single event, wrapped himself in it, made it the engine of every choice. It was efficient, in the way mortal coping strategies occasionally achieved a kind of grim efficiency. It was also, Naruto thought, with a neutrality that would have disturbed anyone who could hear it, a cage the boy had built and locked from the inside. He ignored Sasuke in public with the same theatrical energy he brought to everything in public. Petty rivalry was another useful performance. It gave people something to watch. In private, in the dark of his apartment, Naruto practiced. He had understood what he was working with for years by this point. His chakra reserves were extraordinary, the inheritance of Uzumaki blood amplified enormously by the 9 tails living inside him, but this was not what occupied his practice. What he worked with, alone and in silence, was the other thing. The thing that had no name in this world because no one in this world had ever encountered it. Ki, not chakra, not natural energy in the way Mount Myoboku toads would one day attempt to describe it. Something else, something that did not flow through the chakra pathway system at all but ran parallel to it, deeper, older, like a river beneath a river that nobody had ever thought to dig toward. He had been finding his way toward it since before he could walk. In the early years it had been instinctive, formless, a quality of awareness rather than power. Now, at 7 and then 8 and then 9 years old, it was becoming something he could direct. He began to understand that divine ki was not simply energy. It was intent given physical authority. It was will made manifest at a level below thought. When he pushed it outward, gently, carefully, the way you press a finger against still water to see how far the ripple goes, he could feel the living things around him with a clarity that made chakra sensing feel like looking through fog. Every person within a considerable radius became known to him. Not their thoughts, not their words, but their essence, the quality of their life force, the shape of their character as it existed below all the performances they ran for each other. He kept all of this entirely hidden. At the academy, he let himself fail the clone jutsu several times in front of witnesses. He let himself be redirected and lectured. He stole the scroll of sealing on the night of his graduation exam, genuinely motivated, and he learned the shadow clone jutsu from it in about 40 minutes because his chakra reserves made it less a challenge than a formality, and then he let Ruka find him before he worked through anything else. He graduated. He was placed on a team. He had expected to feel nothing about this. He felt something small and inconvenient instead, watching Iruka's face when the man told him he had passed, watching the genuine pleasure in it, the particular warmth of someone who had invested care in something and was seeing it returned. Naruto filed this too, not as something meaningful, as data on the edges of mortal experience that occasionally produced things that were harder to categorize than he would have preferred. Team 7 was assigned to Kakashi Hatake, who arrived an hour late to their first meeting and said very little that was useful. Naruto observed him with considerably more interest than he showed. Kakashi was different from the other jonin he had studied. The chakra signature was dense and controlled in the way of someone who had been at this for a very long time, but it had something beneath the surface that the others did not. A stillness that was not peace. A man who had made settlements with things that could not be fixed and had arrived at a place past the settling. His left eye, permanently covered, radiated something else entirely, an energy that did not match the rest of him, that hummed at a slightly different frequency. Naruto noted this and kept it. Sasuke he had catalogued already. Sakura he processed in approximately 4 minutes of the first meeting. Intelligent, capable, currently spending the majority of her ability on wanting to be perceived a particular way by Sasuke, which was a waste. He noted this without contempt. It was simply accurate. He performed the rivalry. He performed the crushing on Sakura, which was useful because it was transparently harmless and gave everyone a story about him that required no further examination. He performed being the weakest link. He was not the weakest link. During their bell test, Kakashi expected them to come at him independently and fail, which they did, because it was a test of teamwork and the correct answer was cooperation. Naruto understood this within the first 2 minutes but played through his solo attempt with convincing desperation, letting himself be tied to the post without accessing anything he should not be accessing. He watched Sasuke's attempt with detached interest. Genuine skill, properly channeled through grief and discipline. The Sharingan was a remarkable Kekkei Genkai, a bloodline ability that copied techniques and predicted movement. He filed it away. They passed when Sasuke and Sakura chose to feed him instead of following the stated rules. Naruto let himself be genuinely surprised by this, or near enough that it did not register as performance. Sasuke Uchiha, who had no reason to care about him, had made a choice based on principle over instruction. It was a data point that did not fully fit his working model of the boy. He kept it at the edge of his attention. They became a team. They took low-rank missions. Naruto performed mediocrity with the commitment of a dedicated artist. The Land of Waves changed certain calculations. The escort mission was supposed to be a C rank. Protect a bridge builder named Tazuna on his journey home. Simple enough that Kakashi had accepted it for a team of fresh genin without obvious concern. The ambush on the road outside Konoha announced itself to Naruto approximately 11 seconds before it happened. 2 chakra signatures, suppressed but not gone, hidden in the trees to the left of the road. Skilled, the chakra had that particular compressed quality of people who had spent years learning to make themselves small, hunter nin, missing nin, people for whom concealment was survival. They were waiting for a gap in attention. They had chains between them, wound into their sleeves, designed to be swung in a coordinated arc at throat height. They had done this before. Naruto kept walking. He kept his hands in his pockets and his expression loose and untroubled and waited to see what Kakashi would do. Kakashi, it turned out, had felt them too. He stopped, apparently suddenly, crouching to examine something on the road that was not interesting, and his chakra shifted in the way it shifted when he was making calculations. Naruto had noticed that Kakashi very rarely telegraphed anything. His tells were minute and required the kind of attention Naruto had been cultivating since before he could talk. The attackers launched. Naruto moved. He moved like a genin. He moved with the correct amount of speed for someone his age and training level, stumbled forward and threw himself to the left and hit the dirt and rolled, and the chains passed through the space he had been occupying. In the scramble that followed, with Kakashi intercepting and Sasuke responding with reflexes that were genuinely impressive, Naruto made sure his contribution was visible but unremarkable. A distraction, a setup. He let Kakashi take the difficult hit and played stunned afterward. The 2 missing nin were from the hidden mist. They were demon brothers, which Naruto thought was a title chosen for intimidation rather than accuracy. Tazuna confessed on the road that the mission was not, in fact, AC rank. There was a man named Gato funding efforts to destroy the bridge he was building, a bridge that would free the Land of Waves from economic dependency on a man who held them by the throat because no other route in or out existed. The real threat was Zabuza Momochi, a former member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist. In a rank threat, minimally, Naruto listened to this explanation and felt the thing he had been feeling with increasing frequency since arriving in the world. The slow, careful assembly of evidence. Here was a small country held captive by one man's greed, and the weapon he used was not even violence, not primarily. It was access, the control of a single bridge, a single route, a single connection between people and the ability to live with any degree of self-determination. And a man was building a bridge so that others could breathe, and for this he would be killed if they did not stop it. Mortals, said the old voice in him, again, like a stone dropping into water that never quite settled. They always find new ways to demonstrate the point. Zabuza came for them at the water. Naruto felt him before the mist arrived. There was something notable about Zabuza's chakra, immense and precise in the way of someone who had spent decades refining a very specific set of capabilities. The mist was a technique called the hidden mist jutsu, an ninjutsu that worked by scattering fine water droplets and then allowing the user to navigate within it using the chakra they had already saturated through the mist itself. Effective, Naruto stood inside it and watched Kakashi's chakra shift and expand as the man activated his Sharingan, that borrowed eye that let him see through the technique's interference. He watched Zabuza and Kakashi fight with the attention he gave to things that were genuinely instructive. Zabuza's style was economy made brutal. Every movement served multiple purposes. The Kabikiri Bocho, the massive cleaver blade he carried, was wielded with the offhand ease of someone who had long ago stopped thinking consciously about the mechanics of it. He was, by any honest assessment, a masterpiece of what this world produced when it devoted a human life entirely to killing. Naruto stood with Sasuke and Sakura, protecting Tazuna, and felt the fight through the mist and waited. Zabuza captured Kakashi in a water prison, sent a water clone to finish the genin. Naruto ran. He ran as a genin runs, at genin speed, with genin footwork, stumbling in the difficult footing near the water's edge. He made mistakes. He let the water clone hit him once, a glancing blow that sent him rolling, and he came up with his hands already forming seals, and he created shadow clones, a great many of them, and sent them in a chaotic rush at the clone that Zabuza had constructed. This was genuine. The shadow clone jutsu was something he could do with ease, had been able to do since the night he read it from the scroll of sealing, and the number of clones he could sustain was absurd by any genin standard. But absurd was explainable here. The 9 tails was his excuse. His reserves were known to be monstrous. Letting them see a large number of shadow clones was a controlled disclosure. It revealed something true in a way that concealed something far more significant. What he did not show them was what he did in the 3 seconds when the water clone had its attention divided between his rushing shadow clones and Sasuke's fire technique. He paused, very still, at the edge of the river. He pressed his right hand flat against his thigh, fingers together, and he exhaled, and he let a thread of ki extend from his palm. Not into the air, not visibly, into the water, into the ground, through the mist. He found Zabuza's chakra through it the way you find a fire in a dark room, and he found something else, something perched in the distant trees, watching through a mask. Smaller chakra, young, but precise in a way that suggested the kind of training that started before the muscles were fully formed, before the nervous system had fully knit itself together. The kind of training given to children who were not allowed to be children. He noted this. He filed it. He withdrew the thread before anyone could have possibly noticed it existed. The water clone was destroyed. Zabuza was struck by Kakashi. A hunter nin appeared from the trees and hit Zabuza with senbon needles at fatal points on the neck and declared him dead and took the body. Naruto looked at the place where the masked figure had stood and felt, in the clean neutral space where other people kept their emotions, a single clear observation. That was not a hunter nin. The death had been performed. The body removed before anyone could confirm the vital signs. The senbon placement was precise enough to create apparent death without actually achieving it. Whoever was behind that mask had saved Zabuza while appearing to kill him, and had done it in front of a jonin with a Sharingan. That took skill. He walked back to the group and held his side where the water clone had hit him and made an appropriate face about it. Tazuna's house was small and warm and full of the particular chocolate signature of people holding themselves together through will alone. The wife and daughter and grandson of the bridge builder were doing what humans did when they had run out of options but had not yet run out of love. They were continuing. Naruto sat at the table and ate the soup that was offered and was quiet. That night he climbed to the roof. He sat above the sleeping house and let himself be still in the way he was only ever still when he was completely alone, and he let the performance drop entirely. Not that there was much to drop. The performance was, by now, almost as natural as breathing. But there was a quality to being fully alone that was different. A clarity. He had grown up knowing he was different. That had never been the question. The question he had been assembling for years, piece by piece, observation by observation, was what that difference required of him. What it meant, what the obligation of clarity was, when the people around you could not see what you saw. This world was in pain. It had been in pain for a very long time. The shinobi system itself was built on a foundational architecture of child soldiers and institutional violence and the careful conversion of grief into weapon-grade utility. The Land of Waves was a small, vivid example of something that repeated at every scale. Power concentrated in the hands of people who used it poorly. Lives ground against each other in the endless friction of mortals who could not govern their own natures. He had seen enough. He pressed his hand flat against the roof tiles and let the ki extend again, fully this time, without restraint, feeling the whole dark countryside around him. The sleeping village, Tazuna's house, the forest, And somewhere in that forest, a small fire, and beside it, 2 chakra signatures. One enormous and one small and precise and very deliberately dampened, like someone who had been trained since birth to make themselves invisible. He sat with this for a while. Then he formed the key in his hand into something that had no name in this world's language. A thin blade of light along his forearm, compressed and dense, the divine energy made edge. It lasted approximately 3 seconds before he let it dissolve. No one was awake to see it. It was not for anyone. It was practice. He had time. He had patience in quantities that most living things could not fathom. Whatever was coming, whatever this world was building toward in its blind, stumbling, mortal way, he would be ready. And he would be watching. He climbed back down and went to sleep like a 12-year-old boy who had mildly strained his side from a water clone and was tired from the road. In the morning, he pulled weeds from Tezuna's garden when asked and complained about it, and Inari, the grandson, watched him with the furious, suspicious grief of a child who had decided hope was the most dangerous thing available. And Naruto looked at him and understood him completely and said nothing of consequence, because there was nothing he needed to say. He was not here to save anyone's heart. He was here to watch, and to learn, and to wait until he understood exactly what this world was, and what, if anything, it deserved. The second time Zabuza came, the bridge was wrapped in mist. It arrived the way it always arrived with him, deliberately, spreading outward from the water like something alive, swallowing the wooden planks of the unfinished bridge and the gray sky above it until the world reduced itself to a radius of a few meters in every direction. Naruto stood inside it with his hands loose at his sides and felt the whole battlefield through the key he kept threaded just below the surface of his skin, invisible, soundless, a sense that rendered the mist meaningless. He knew where everyone was, Kakashi and Zabuza, finding each other in the gray, the villagers who had come to stand at the bridge's edge, Tezuna's workers, people who had decided that something was worth dying beside even if they could not fight. Tezuna himself, who was holding a tool in both hands and breathing with the particular rhythm of a man who had decided fear was less important than the thing he was afraid for. Sasuke, nearby, his chakra that familiar tight coil of cold purpose. And Haku, moving. Naruto could feel Haku more clearly now than he had in the forest. The young fighter moved with absolute economy, reading the battlefield through the ice mirrors that Haku had constructed from moisture pulled out of the mist itself, each one a perfectly reflective surface that allowed movement between them at speeds that genuinely would have been difficult to track without the awareness Naruto carried. The technique was called the crystal ice mirrors, and it was a Kekkei Jinkei, a bloodline limit, something that could not be taught or copied. Haku had been born with the ability to combine wind and water nature chakra into something that existed between them, into ice that responded to thought. Naruto let himself be caught in it. He moved like a genin caught off guard by something he could not fully process. He threw shuriken that scattered against the reflective surfaces. He stumbled. He shouted in the voice he used for performing urgency. The mirrors closed around him. Haku moved between them like a thought made physical, appearing and vanishing. Senbon needles striking with clinical precision at points designed not to kill but to accumulate damage. Naruto took the hits. He let them land, not all of them. He deflected what he could justify deflecting, but enough to paint a convincing picture. Then Sasuke was there. He had broken through the outer mirror, had positioned himself between Naruto and the incoming valley with the decision already made before the thinking had finished, and the Senbon struck him, dozens of them, needle precise at every major tenketsu point on his body, and he went down. Naruto looked at him on the ground, looked at the absence of movement, felt the chakra in the boy's body, disrupted and stuttering but present, still present, and registered that Sasuke was not dead. But he had jumped in front of needles for him. Naruto filed this. It went into the same category as the bell test, the same data point that kept refusing to resolve into something simple. Sasuke Uchiha, who had no earthly reason to care about the dead last of their team, who had built his entire existence into a single pointed instrument aimed at one target, had thrown himself in the way of harm meant for someone he publicly disdained. The Sharingan had activated in those final seconds before the needles hit. He had seen it, the transformation of the eye, the tomo appearing in that distinctive red, an awakening triggered by the particular alchemy of adrenaline and emotional extremity that the Uchiha bloodline required. Naruto stood over him, and he felt something that required a moment to identify because it was unfamiliar in the specific way that unfamiliar things sometimes were. Not grief, not sentiment, something more like recognition. Here was someone the mold had tried to break and had not quite managed. Here was someone whose suffering had not made them small. He noted it. He set it aside. Haku was still inside the mirrors, and Naruto was alone. He stopped performing. It happened without drama. There was no shift in his expression because his expression had not been doing anything meaningful for quite some time. He simply straightened. He turned to face the nearest mirror, and he allowed himself, for the first time since arriving in this country, to be exactly what he was. The ki extended from him like a second skin uncurling, not with the careful thread-thin precision he used for sensing, but fully, the divine energy pressing outward in all directions and then drawing back in, gathering, compressing into something with weight and edge. The mist curled away from him slightly, repelled by something it had no mechanism to understand. Haku appeared between two mirrors, moving at a speed that had seemed untrackable, and Naruto hit him. Not with a technique, not with a jutsu formed through hand seals and trained muscle memory. He simply moved, faster than he had moved in front of anyone who was still conscious to observe it, and his fist connected with Haku's sternum with a force that carried the compression of ki behind it, and Haku went through the nearest ice mirror like it was made of paper. The mirrors shattered, all of them. The Kekkei Genkai required concentration to maintain, and what Haku was not doing in that moment was concentrating. Naruto stood in the open air of the bridge and looked at the figure lying on the wooden planks several meters away. Haku was still alive, the chakra was present, disrupted and desperate, the body trying to reassemble its sense of itself. He had not hit him with everything. Not quite. He walked over. Haku looked up at him from the ground with eyes that were still clear despite the damage, that particular quality of someone who had been trained past the point where pain fully registered. There was no fear in the face. There was something almost like relief, which Naruto found interesting. He crouched down. He looked at Haku's face for a long moment. Here was someone who had been built into a weapon by someone else's grief and need, who had found, in that construction, a purpose that felt like meaning. Who would die for Zabuza not because they had been commanded to, but because they had chosen to, as completely and consciously as any choice could be made. It was not worthiness, but it was something. Naruto formed the ki in his right hand into the blade. It emerged along his forearm as a flat edge of compressed divine energy, pale and cold and very slightly luminous, and it did not make a sound because it was not of this world's physics. He held it for a moment, looking at it, and then he looked at Haku. Haku's eyes went to the blade and understood what it was, what it meant. He did not beg. Naruto made it quick. He split the body with a single motion and the ki blade dissolved as he stood, and he felt the life force extinguish beneath his feet the way a candle extinguishes, completely and without remainder. He stood there for a moment, not in remorse. He did not have the architecture for remorse in the conventional sense. He stood there in the pause that followed an action completed, the space where the action could be observed in its totality, and he allowed himself to know what he had just done and what he intended it to mean. Judgment said something old in him. Not punishment, not revenge, judgment. The mist was thinning. He had perhaps 30 seconds before sightlines opened up. He reached into himself and produced a shadow clone from the shadow clone reserve he had been maintaining passively since the fight began. A clone that had been standing approximately where he had been standing, taking the role he had been playing, existing at the correct level of damage and exhaustion for a genin who had been through what he appeared to have been through. He sent it to where he had been. Then he moved. He left the bridge entirely before the mist cleared enough for Kakashi to track him, moving at a speed he would not demonstrate again in observable conditions for quite some time, crossing the water of the harbor in a matter of seconds by running across its surface with chakra rather than anything more exotic. He felt the boats before he saw them. Gato's fleet, dozens of vessels, crammed with hired men who had not been hired for their quality as human beings. Men paid to hurt things that could not fight back, which was a very specific category of person that the world produced in reliable quantities whenever there was money available to fund it. Their chakra signatures were uninteresting, dense with the low-grade aggression of people who had found a way to convert their capacity for cruelty into income. Naruto landed on the lead boat. The man closest to him had time to turn before Naruto was already past him, and past the next one, and the next. He moved through the bow like something between wind and certainty. The ki blade was out, and it cut with a precision that chakra-enhanced weapons could approach but not quite achieve, because it was not operating on the physical world's terms but imposing itself on them, and the men it reached did not bleed dramatically because the edge was too clean for that. The second boat, the third, he moved with the efficiency of someone for whom this was neither exciting nor distressing. It was maintenance. It was the removal of something that had been causing damage and would continue to cause damage if permitted to continue existing. He felt no pleasure in it. He felt no disgust. He felt the particular clean quality of an action that was precisely suited to what the situation required, no more and no less. Gato was on the third boat, at the rear, behind men he had paid to be in front. He was small and wore expensive clothes, and his chakra had the quality of someone who had never once been afraid of consequences because he had always had enough money to make consequences redirect themselves elsewhere. He saw Naruto coming and opened his mouth. Naruto placed 2 fingers against his forehead and pushed a single compressed pulse of ki through them, and Gato sat down and did not get up. He stood for a moment on the quiet boat, surrounded by the still water of the harbor, and he felt the whole fleet. The silence, the absence of those dozens of chocolate signatures that had been there moments before. He felt nothing complicated about it. He moved back toward the bridge. The clone had served its purpose. It had stood in the appropriate place, held the appropriate expression, let Kakashi come to it and find it apparently stunned and shaking, had said the correct things about losing control, about something happening in the fight with Haku that it could not fully explain, about Haku being struck and falling from the bridge into the water below. Kakashi's chakra had spiked when the clone said this, the particular quality of a sensor reading an energy pattern they recognized, and the clone had felt him conclude what he was meant to conclude. The 9 tails, a surge, a loss of control, something to be concerned about and addressed carefully over time. When Naruto swapped back, the clone dissolved without fanfare, and he stood in his own body again and let Kakashi's hand on his shoulder register as something a 12-year-old would feel as steadying. He made his face do the right things. Zabuza was dead. Kakashi had put him down before the fleet's arrival, which made the fleet's arrival academic rather than a complication. The villagers who had come to stand at the bridge were standing in the aftermath of it now, beginning to understand that the thing they had been afraid of had stopped. Inari was there, having come when the battle was already done, his face doing several things at once in the way children's faces do when they have run very hard toward something and arrived to find it already resolved. Naruto looked at the boy and felt the data point land again. He had run toward the bridge, toward the fight, with no ability to affect it, with only the previous night's decision that something was worth moving toward rather than away from. He would remember that, on the road home, Kakashi walked beside him for a portion of the journey and said things about managing the 9 tails chakra and not letting the seal strain, about coming to him if he felt the energy surfacing in ways he could not govern. He said these things with the particular care of someone who was genuinely trying to help, who believed he was addressing a real problem and carrying the appropriate weight of responsibility for it. Naruto listened and said what a slightly frightened 12-year-old would say, and the conversation resolved itself into the shape Kakashi needed it to take. He stared at the road ahead of them and was very quiet inside. 5 months, that was the time between the Land of Waves and the start of the Chunin exams, and Naruto used every day of it. He left the village at night, usually, which was not as difficult as it might have seemed. His apartment was on the edge of the residential district, and the Ambu rotation that watched him had been doing so since he was an infant and had settled into patterns. He knew the patterns the way he knew breathing. He created a clone that slept in his bed with the convincing depth of someone who had trained hard and was genuinely tired, and he went over the wall and into the country around Konoha and he worked. The experiments began as observation. He had understood for some time that ki was not exclusive to him. Every living thing carried it, in the way every living thing carried some form of energy fundamental to its existence. Chakra was this world's version of that principle, and mortals here had developed entire systems of accessing and applying it. But ki was older than chakra. It was what chakra was a derivative expression of, and most people in this world carried it in its raw and entirely inaccessible form, untouched, latent, like a power source sealed inside a container that had no mechanism for opening. He began to experiment with awakening it. The first few attempts ended badly in ways he had anticipated. He found subjects carefully, travelers on the roads outside the Fire Country border, people who were already outside of safe social structures, people whose absence would not generate organized searching. He located them, and he pressed ki into their life force carefully, trying to find the frequency at which their natural reservoir of divine energy could be caused to respond. The first 2 exploded, not dramatically, not in the way a jutsu explosion worked, with fire and concussive force. The bodies simply failed at the cellular level, every system overwhelmed simultaneously, the life force collapsing inward rather than opening outward. It was very quick. Naruto observed the results with clinical attention and made the necessary adjustments to his understanding. Too much force, the energy needed to be introduced more slowly, more precisely, calibrated to the particular density and quality of the individual's existing life force. Different people had different thresholds. He continued. The third attempt produced a different result. An older man with a naturally strong constitution, a former blacksmith whose chakra pathways, though completely untrained, had the particular robustness that came from decades of hard physical work. The key took, not fully, not cleanly, but it found a foothold and did not destroy what it landed in. The man did not understand what was happening to him. He looked at Naruto with an expression somewhere between confusion and a very deep calm that he did not have the framework to explain. Naruto took him apart again afterward. He was not ready. The connection was incomplete and would eventually degrade in ways that would create unpredictable behavioral changes that Naruto was not yet prepared to manage. He was methodical about it. He learned. Over the months, he began to develop a clearer sense of what he was looking for. The constitution, yes, but also something harder to quantify. A quality of will, people whose sense of self was not built on something brittle, whose identity did not depend on the particular emotional architecture that most humans constructed and then collapsed inside of. People who could receive the key infusion and be fundamentally reorganized by it without shattering. They were rare, but they existed. He began to think about Sasuke, not with the sentiment that the thought might have carried in another version of himself. He thought about Sasuke the way he thought about problems that had potential solutions worth considering. Here was someone whose natural foundation was extraordinary. Uchiha blood, trained from early childhood, possessing a kekkei genkai that was genuinely remarkable. Here was someone whose entire identity was built around a purpose that was, by any honest assessment, consuming him. The rage was the engine and the cage simultaneously. If the purpose could be removed, if the wound that had organized his entire existence could be drawn out and something else placed in its space. Something wider, something that did not have a single point of failure. Naruto sat with this thought for several weeks before the Chunin exams arrived. The written exam was a demonstration of collective intelligence and a test of how well students could identify information without being caught gathering it, which was a shinobi skill delivered in an academic format. Naruto took the correct number of answers from Sakura's paper, making sure to be seen doing it imperfectly enough to generate appropriate anxiety, and submitted the paper with a number of deliberate errors alongside the correct ones. He passed. They all passed. The forest of death was more interesting. Orochimaru found them on the second day. Naruto had felt him before he revealed himself, which was to say he had felt him at the edge of the forest before they had even entered it. A chakra signature of extraordinary density and complexity, old in the way that chakra becomes old when someone has spent decades pushing it into configurations it was never meant to achieve. There was something else beneath it, something that did not sit comfortably beside the rest of it, a quality that reminded him faintly of something he had spent considerable time researching in the months before the exams. The cursed seals that Orochimaru placed in subjects. He had heard the accounts, read the mission reports that were technically classified but that he had accessed through means that were technically undisclosed. A technique that used a specific compressed chakra formula to override the existing network of the host body, imposing Orochimaru's own chakra nature over the top of theirs. He waited to see what move would be made. Orochimaru came at them in the form of a grass ninja, the transformation holding until it did not need to. And then the snake began to unspool from beneath the performance in a way that most shinobi found deeply and instinctively disturbing. Kakashi had briefed them on Orochimaru. Naruto had added considerably to that briefing through his own research without telling anyone he had done so. He watched Sakura freeze and then gather herself. He watched Sasuke freeze in a way that Sasuke had never frozen before, something in the Uchiha's nervous system recognizing a category of threat it did not have a trained response for. And this was notable because Sasuke had a trained response for most things by now. He let Orochimaru begin the technique. The killing intent that Orochimaru released was genuine, which was to say it was the particular energy that came from someone who had inflicted so much death that it had become a vocabulary they spoke fluently, and it pressed on the air like pressure and like cold. Naruto felt it the way he felt rain. He stood in it and was still and noted the quality of it and waited. Sasuke responded. He always responded. The Sharingan activated and Sasuke pushed back against the killing intent with his own, and for a moment it was genuinely impressive, the quality of defiance that Sasuke Uchiha brought to things he refused to allow, and then Orochimaru bit him. The cursed seal took hold. Naruto watched Sasuke go down, watched the seal spread from the bite mark on the neck, dark lines extending across the skin in a pattern that moved like something living, like a net being cast from a single point outward. Orochimaru turned to him and stopped. He had never had someone stop when they looked at him. Not this way, not with the specific quality of freezing that came from the nervous system receiving information it did not have a category for, in defaulting to the ancient response of prey recognizing something it had no business being in proximity to. Orochimaru had eyes that had seen most of what this world had to offer and had developed a connoisseur's relationship with things that were dangerous. He looked at Naruto and something behind those eyes recalibrated. Naruto looked back at him. He let the ki surface. Not all of it, not even most of it. Just enough to answer the question that Orochimaru's gaze was asking. A warmth spreading outward from him in a radius too small for the others to register, but close enough for Orochimaru, at the distance of a meter, to feel land on him like heat from an open door. Orochimaru's chakra shifted. Fight or flight resolved itself in the direction that kept the most options open. He moved. Naruto crossed the distance between them in a step that covered too much ground to be explained by anything in Orochimaru's model of genin capabilities, and he hit him 3 times in the sequence that accessed the ki most efficiently at this stage of his practice. 2 body blows that carried the compression of divine energy behind them, and 1 open palm strike to the sternum that sent the Sannin backward through a tree and then the next tree and then the ground. He stood over Orochimaru, who lay in the torn earth looking up at him, and he could see the calculation happening in real time. The reassessment of what this was, the reach for explanations, the 9 tails, certainly, that would be the first and most reassuring conclusion, that the Jinchuriki had lost control, that this was the beast's power and not the boy's. Orochimaru would hold on to that. It was the container his mind would fit this in because it was the only container available that did not require a complete rewriting of his understanding of the world. Naruto let him hold onto Ed. He also let him go. He stepped back and let Orochimaru collect himself and retreat into the forest, which the Sannin did with the particular dignity of someone removing themselves from a situation while maintaining they had chosen to do so. Naruto watched him go and noted the direction. He would need to revisit this later. He turned back to his team. Sakura was unconscious. Sasuke was down, the cursed seal's initial activation having run its course through him in a surge that left him collapsed and breathing shallowly. Naruto crouched beside him and pressed his hand to the seal mark. He felt it, the architecture of the thing, Orochimaru's compressed chakra formula overlaying Sasuke's own network, waiting for the moment when Sasuke's emotional intensity crossed the threshold that would trigger its full expansion. Designed to consume, designed to replace, Naruto found the frequency of Orochimaru's signature in the seal and introduced the ki as a counter-current. Not destructively, not in a way that would damage the chakra network it was embedded in. He unraveled it the way you unravel something tangled, finding the thread that in an amount small enough to be undetectable to any sensor that was working with chocolate-based detection, which was all of them. A seed, not a command, not a control mechanism. A seed that would grow along Sasuke's own energy pathways until his constitution had fully accepted it, at which point it would open in him the way a door opens when you finally find the right key. He removed his hand. Sasuke would not know. He would assume the seal had been neutralized somehow, would attribute it to the Nine Tails' influence or to something that had happened while he was unconscious. He would notice, over time, a quality of clarity that he had not had before, a stillness beneath the rage that had not been there. He would not know where it came from. He would be changed at a level below awareness. Naruto sat back and let the forest be quiet around him. He had not told Sasuke. He had not asked Sasuke. He had made a unilateral determination about what Sasuke needed and had acted on it. He examined this fact from multiple angles, sitting in the dirt beside 2 unconscious teammates. He found it straightforward. Sasuke's pain was a structural flaw, not a fundamental truth. Removing it was not a violation of something essential. It was a correction, a kindness, even though he did not feel particularly invested in the kindness dimension of it. It was simply the most efficient path to the outcome that the situation warranted. He settled in to wait for them to wake up. Jiraiya arrived in Konoha 2 weeks before the final round of the exams. He announced himself the way he announced most things, loudly and in a direction nobody needed him to be loud toward, and the village received him with the combination of relief and exasperation that seemed to be the standard emotional register for interacting with him. He had been one of the legendary Sannin. He had been the 4th Hokage's teacher. He was, by most assessments, one of the most capable shinobi the village had produced in the last 50 years. He also, Naruto noticed immediately, was paying very specific attention to him. not the way the villagers paid attention to him, with the discomfort of people managing their awareness of something they had decided in advance how to feel about. Jiraiya's attention had the quality of genuine inquiry. He watched Naruto the way Naruto watched things, which was to say he was actually looking. He offered to train him in the month before the final exam. Kakashi had conflicts, preparing Sasuke for his match, and Naruto had been assigned to prepare independently. Jiraiya stepped in with an offer that was framed casually but was not casual. Naruto agreed with the appropriate enthusiasm. Their first session was at the hot springs training ground on the east side of the village. Jiraiya sat him down and talked about the summoning technique, which was something Naruto had been aware of as a capability he could develop, and began to walk through the mechanics. He watched Naruto process the information with the particular attentiveness of someone conducting an assessment under the cover of instruction. Naruto gave him what he needed. He struggled with the summoning for longer than he needed to. He produced a tadpole first, which was canon performance, then a small toad, then escalated with the 9 tails push to Gamabunta, which was the correct escalation and produced the desired outcome while remaining within the parameters of things that could be attributed to existing explanations. But Jiraiya, after the session, sat beside him and was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know something." Not a question, Naruto looked at him with the face he wore for situations that required him to be unreadable while appearing transparent. A slightly confused 12-year-old who was not sure what the old man meant. Jiraiya looked back at him. His chakra had the quality of God when he was testing the performance he ran for most people, the warm, deflective foolishness that kept casual acquaintances comfortable. Underneath it was something older and much more serious. "I don't know what it is yet," Jiraiya said, "but something is different about you, kid. Not the 9 tails. I've been around enough Jinchuriki to know what that feels like. This is something else." Naruto held the silence for exactly the right number of seconds. "I don't know what you mean, old man," he said. Jiraiya looked at him a moment longer. Then he stood and said they would continue tomorrow and walked away. And Naruto watched him go and felt the edges of the man's worry pressing against his awareness like fingers testing a wall for weak points. He would need to be more careful around Jiraiya. He noted this and added it to the category of things that required ongoing management. The invasion came during the final exam, as it had always been meant to. The sound and sand combined assault, triggered by Orochimaru's signal and timed to the moment when the village's guard was divided between hosting an event and defending a perimeter. Naruto had known it was coming. He had identified the sand shinobi in the crowd whose chakra had the compressed quality of people maintaining a performance and waiting for a signal. He had felt the moment the signal was given. He played the exam until he needed to play it differently. His fight with Neji Hyuga happened in the proper sequence, and he won it the proper way, using the 9 tails chakra in the conventional dramatic fashion that Neji and the watching crowd and the Hyuga elders needed to see, pushing through the sealed tenkatsu with brute force and belief. It was one of the more useful performances he had given, because the lesson it appeared to teach, that the limits imposed on you by others could be broken, was true enough that delivering it required no dishonesty. Only selectivity about which truths were being demonstrated. He found Gaara outside the village. Gaara of the Sand was a Jinchuriki in the oldest sense of the word, someone who had been made into a weapon from birth and given no other framework for existing. The one-tailed beast, Shukaku, was less controlled inside him than Kurama was inside Naruto, which was not Gaara's failure so much as it was the failure of the people who had built the container. He had been left alone with a demon and no instruction set except that loneliness was the price of what he was. He had built himself a philosophy from that raw material, because humans always built something, and what he had built was this. The only proof of his existence was the blood of others. Naruto fought him in the way that was needed, let the one tail partially emerge, matched it with enough of Kurama's chocolate to make it meaningful, and then, when the moment arrived where the fight had reached its intended conclusion, he did something that was not in the expected script. He placed his hand on Gaara's chest. Gaara was on the ground, exhausted, chakra depleted, the one tail withdrawn back into its seal. Looking up at him with an expression that was confusion layered over something he did not have a name for, the particular lost quality of someone who had survived a fight they had fully expected to end differently. Naruto looked at him for a moment. He thought about Inari, running toward the bridge, the data point that had never fully resolved. He thought about Sasuke blocking the Senbon. He thought about the formula he had been refining for 6 months, the question of what made something worthy versus what made something simply in pain. He decided the key went into Gaara differently than it had gone into Sasuke. Sasuke had needed a removal. a clearing of something that was occupying space that should have been open. Gora needed something closer to a foundation. A ground to stand on that was not made of violence. The seat he placed was larger than the one he had given Sasuke, because the space available was correspondingly emptier. Gaara looked at him with eyes that had gone very still. He would not know, either. He would wake from They would attribute it to the fight, to whatever Naruto had done to him, in the imprecise way people attribute interior changes to the last exterior event they can point to. Naruto stood and walked back toward the village. The invasion was resolving itself. Sound was retreating. The third Hokage had engaged Orochimaru in a battle that was drawing considerable attention at the administrative building, which meant that Orochimaru was presently occupied and his attention was directed toward the old man who was giving him more resistance than expected. This created an interval. Naruto stepped sideways out of the visible flow of events. The Sound Four were guarding Orochimaru's planned retreat route. 4 shinobi, selected for capability and loyalty in the particular way that Orochimaru selected things, which was to say they were genuinely capable and their loyalty was built on a foundation of what he could give them rather than anything more durable. Naruto found them at the forest's edge east of the administrative district, maintaining their position and waiting for the signal to move. He dealt with them quickly. He did not use the key plate for all of them. He used chakra for the first 2. Standard taijutsu pushed beyond genin parameters but not beyond what could be attributed to a jinchuriki in an emotionally heightened state. For the latter 2, he used the key plate because it was efficient and there was no one watching and efficiency mattered. He stood at the edge of the tree line and felt the battle between the third Hokage and Orochimaru resolving. Felt the moment when the old man activated the dead demon-consuming seal, which Naruto had read about extensively, the same seal that had been used to seal Kurama into him, and felt the quality of what it cost its user. He felt Orochimaru flee. He followed. Orochimaru moved through the forest with the speed of someone who had decades of survival instinct directing every decision. And he was fast, genuinely fast. And he was already modified his route and extending his lead and accessing the contingency that would take him out of the Fire Country's reach before any pursuit could be organized. He was not expecting a 12-year-old to be ahead of him. Naruto dropped from the canopy and landed on the path 3 meters in front of him. Orochimaru stopped. They were in a clearing where the moonlight came through the breaks in the leaves and the village sounds were distant and there was no one in sensor range on either side of them. Naruto could feel this with complete certainty. They were alone. Orochimaru looked at him with the eyes that had been recalibrating ever since the force of death. He had had time to think since then. Time to work through the available explanations and test them against what he had felt in those 3 strikes, that particular quality of energy that did not match any chakra nature he had encountered in decades of obsessive research into the full spectrum of what the body could do. His face did something complex. "You're not just a Jinchuriki," he said. "No," Naruto said. It was the most honest thing he had said out loud in years. He found it almost comfortable. Orochimaru's hand moved toward a summoning. Naruto was already inside the motion's path before it resolved, and the keyblade was out, and it moved twice in a pattern that was precise enough to achieve what was needed and nothing more. Orochimaru went still. Naruto stood in the clearing alone and felt the life force extinguish at his feet, and he looked at the man who had spent decades trying to transcend mortality through increasingly unsustainable means, who had built a philosophy of survival on the principle that the self was the only thing worth preserving, and he found, in the clean space where judgment lived, that the account was closed. He dissolved his presence in the clearing. No footprints, no chocolate residue that would not be attributed to the battle in the village. He walked back toward Konoha through the dark forest and he felt the whole country around him, the sleeping and the grieving and the recovering, and he was very quiet. He had taken several significant steps tonight. He was 12 years old and he had ended a Sannin and purified 2 Jinchuriki and maintained his performance through a village-wide assault without breaking the character he had been building for years, and none of it, not one moment of it, had required him to be anything other than exactly what he was. He walked back into the village through the gap in the eastern wall that the invasion had opened and that no one had fully closed yet in the chaos of the aftermath, and he found a bench near the medical center where the injured were being brought, and he sat on it. He watched the medics move, watched people carrying others, watched the particular quality of a community after it has been struck, the reorganization that happened when the immediate threat was gone and people were assessing what they still had. He watched all of it. And he thought about the 6 months ahead of him, and what they might be used for, and what was worth building, and who might be worth building with. The bench was warm from the day's retained heat, and the night was quiet, and somewhere behind him the village of Konoha was doing what it always did, finding a way to still be standing. He watched it with the patience of something that did not need to rush. He had waited longer than any of them knew to be here. He could afford to be patient a little while longer. He sat on the bench until the first light came. Then he went home. Time skip. The road to Tenzaku town was long and Jiraiya talked for most of it. This was not unusual. Jiraiya talked the way some people breathe, continuously and without apparent effort, filling available silence with commentary on the scenery and the food at the last town and the philosophical dimensions of whatever sake he had most recently consumed. Naruto walked beside him and listened and gave back the appropriate responses at the appropriate intervals, and underneath the performance he was watching the man the way he watched everything, with a patient attention that never fully rested. Jiraiya was not simply talking. He was watching. It was subtle enough that most people would not have noticed the assessment happening beneath the warmth and the noise. But Naruto had spent years developing a sensitivity to the gap between what people presented and what they were actually doing, and Jiraiya was doing something precise and serious under the cover of being companionable. He was testing reactions, saying things that were designed to land at particular angles and then observing what they produced. He was mapping Naruto the way a careful shinobi mapped terrain before committing to a route through it. Naruto found this genuinely interesting. He gave the man enough to work with, not enough to reach any useful conclusions. He performed the 12-year-old still finding his footing in the larger world, curious about everything, processing Jiraiya's stories about the sunning years with the transparent wonder of someone who had not heard them before. He asked the questions that the performance required. He laughed where laughter was called for. He also thought about Sasuke, who was back in Konoha, and about what Sasuke would be experiencing right now. The ki had been growing in Sasuke for months. He knew this the way he knew the locations of everyone he had seated, a faint warmth at the edge of awareness for each of them, a sense of the connection running between his divine energy and what was growing in them. Sasuke's was the strongest of those connections, which made sense given the quantity and quality of the seed he had planted. The Uchiha blood conducted it differently than anything else he had encountered in his experiments, more efficiently, like a metal that was simply better suited to carrying current. He could feel Sasuke changing. The rage was still there, but it was changing in quality the way fire changes when you give it a better fuel source, burning cleaner, burning with less waste. The grief that had organized him around a single obsessive purpose was not gone, but it was becoming something else, redistributing itself across a wider framework. The devotion that was growing in its place was something that had no name yet in Sasuke's emotional vocabulary, which meant he was carrying it as something unfamiliar and slightly disorienting, a loyalty without a fully articulated object. Naruto let it grow. Gaara he could feel from considerably further away, which surprised him initially and then did not. The desert amplified things, the quality of the sand village's environment, the particular silence of it, the vast empty space that surrounded it, gave energy nowhere to dissipate. Gaara sat in the middle of all of that open space, and the ki inside him expanded into it like water poured on dry ground, spreading further than any of the others had so far. He was changing faster than Sasuke. The peace Naruto had placed in him was becoming something more than peace. It was becoming a foundation that everything else was building on top of. He thought about Gaara becoming the case cage, not as something distant, as something practical, a village under a leader who was aligned with Naruto's purposes, whose authority over the land of wind shinobi infrastructure would be useful in ways that were already becoming clear in his thinking. He thought about Tsunade Senju and what he knew about her and what he intended to do with that knowledge. They found her at a gambling table, which was exactly where the accounts had said she would be, losing at a rate that had apparently been consistent for years. Naruto observed her from a distance before they made contact. She was physically extraordinary, which was expected. The Senju blood combined with decades of medical ninjutsu practice had produced a woman who had learned to control her cellular structure with enough precision to suspend its natural aging in its most functional configuration. Her chocolate was immense and the particular quality of it was unmistakable. The deep, wide steadiness of someone whose control over living tissue was so complete it had become unconscious. But beneath all of it, beneath the physical mastery and the legendary capability, there was a wound so old it had become structural. Naruto felt at the moment he was close enough to read her clearly. The grief was not like Sasuke's, which was sharp and purposeful and aimed. It was diffuse. It had been bleeding for years without coagulating, kept open by the particular cruelty of guilt that has nowhere to go because its objects are gone. Dan, Milwaukee, the two people she had loved who had died in the spaces between her hands, died while she was reaching for them, died as proof of a thesis she had accepted and arranged her entire life around ever since. That the things she loved would be taken from her. That hope was the mechanism by which that loss was delivered. She had built herself a life around the careful maintenance of that conclusion. The gambling was the visible surface of it. The behavior of someone who had decided that winning and losing were random and equally meaningless, and that investment in outcomes was simply a way to set up the next lesson in why investment was not worth it. The sake was older than the gambling. She had been drinking since before Naruto was born, which meant she had been not feeling since before Naruto was born, which meant the wound was fully installed and had decades of defensive architecture around it. He watched her for 2 days before Jiraiya introduced them. During those 2 days, he made certain calculations. Tsunade Senju had refused the Hokage position for years. The village needed her, the third was gone, and the administrative structure required someone of her capabilities and her name and her history to hold the shape of it while the recovery from the invasion continued. Jiraiya had already tried to convince her and had not succeeded, which meant the direct approach was not the approach that would work on her. He needed to find the angle. He found it by watching her with Shizune, her assistant and the niece of Dan, the man she had loved and lost. The way Tsunade was with Shizune was different from the way she was with anyone else. Not soft, exactly, something more guarded than soft. The particular quality of someone who had allowed one attachment to remain when all the rest had been systematically closed off, and who was therefore even more protective of that remaining one than they would have been if they had allowed themselves more. He noted that. He also noted that she flinched, almost imperceptibly, when she saw him. He was blonde and blue-eyed, and the shape of his face was something she recognized. He saw her recognize it and then look away, and he felt the spike of her chakra, grief and guilt and something unresolved pressing up from beneath the surface of her careful maintenance. She knew whose son he was. She had known Minato. Of course she had. Konoha was a village and the Sannin had been part of its inner architecture for decades. She had known Minato, and she was looking at his face in miniature, and she was feeling the particular weight of that in a way she had not expected to feel it today. Naruto filed this carefully. He gave her the version of himself she needed to see, not a performance of sadness. He did not lean into the orphan angle. That would be transparent and would not work on someone who had been around shinobi her entire life. He gave her something more specific, the quality of a child who had learned to carry things alone and had gotten very good at it and was, in this moment, choosing not to hide that he was carrying them. Something genuine underneath the surface, enough genuine that it could be found. He talked to her about what he wanted to be, about the village. He said the things that needed to be said about protecting people and about not wanting others to lose what he had lost, and he said them in a way that was selective truth rather than full fabrication, which made them land with the weight that selective truth always lands with, which is heavier than lies and lighter than the complete picture. He watched her face while he spoke. He saw the moment it arrived, the moment when the conclusion she had spent years defending against made its way through anyway, because the particular combination of his face and his words and the grief she was already carrying had found a gap in the architecture and walked through it. Hope, the thing she had been protecting herself from for years,
landing on her anyway through a 12-year-old boy who looked like someone she had failed to save. He felt her chakra shift. She agreed to come back. He stood in the alley outside the gambling hall afterward and felt nothing in particular about the fact that he had just manipulated one of the most powerful medical shinobi alive by precisely targeting the most damaged part of her. And he turned this absence of feeling over in his thoughts for a moment, examining it the way he examined everything, and then he walked back to where Jiraiya was waiting and allowed himself to look pleased in the way of a child who had done something well. Jiraiya was watching him again with that specific quality of attention. Naruto met his eyes and smiled and said nothing. Jiraiya walked beside him on the road back to Konoha and said, at a point in the evening when Tsunade and Shizune were far enough ahead that the distance was meaningful, she cried a little, you know. After you spoke to her. Naruto looked at the road. She had a lot to cry about. She did, Jiraiya said. He was quiet for a moment. You knew exactly what to say to her. I just said what was true. You said what was true in exactly the right order, Jiraiya said. In exactly the right way. At exactly the right time. Naruto said nothing. Jiraiya stopped walking. Naruto stopped a moment later and turned to look at him. The old man was standing in the last of the day's light and his face was doing something that was not quite suspicion and not quite understanding and lived uncomfortably between them. His chakra had the quality it had been getting more frequently around Naruto, that reaching quality. pressing toward something it could sense but not identify. "Who are you?" Jiraiya asked, not in the way of someone who thought the answer would be simple. Naruto looked at him for a long moment. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki," he said. "I'm going to become Hokage." He turned and walked after Tsunade and Shizune, and Jiraiya stood on the road behind him for a while before following, and Naruto could feel the man's chakra at his back the entire walk, troubled and watchful and arriving at no conclusions that would be useful to him. Tsunade became the 5th Hokage. The village received this with the relief of a place that had been holding its breath for weeks. The administrative structure that had been stretched thin since the third's death drew itself back into coherence.
Sakura attached herself to Tsunade's medical program with an enthusiasm that Naruto observed with mild interest, watching the girl who had spent most of her early training performing intelligence for an audience now beginning to direct that intelligence towards something with actual weight to it. She was developing into something genuine. He noted this without it changing much in his assessment of her. Sasuke was quieter than he had been before the exams, not in the way of someone brooding over a wound but in the way of someone adjusting to a new framework they had not yet fully mapped. His training had become more focused, less driven by the specific pointed urgency that had always previously characterized it, the need to get somewhere before Itachi got further, and more characterized by something steadier. He moved through the village with a quality that people who knew him attributed to maturity, to the exam having changed him, to the cursed seal's removal having given him some relief. Naruto watched him across the courtyard of the training ground one afternoon. Sasuke looked up and found him watching, and his expression did something new. Something that had not been in his face a year ago, a quality of recognition, of settling, like a compass finding north. He held Naruto's gaze for a moment and then looked back at his training without hostility or performance. Naruto was satisfied. He thought about the 3 years ahead of him. The training trip with Jiraiya lasted 2 years and 8 months, during which time Naruto became something that the Sage Mode instructors at Mount Myoboku would later have trouble categorizing, which was exactly what he intended. He learned the summoning contracts properly. He trained the Rasengan variations that he had been performing in capability with for years. He developed the wind nature applications that would form the surface architecture of his visible jutsu repertoire. He gave Jiraiya enough genuine progress to keep the man satisfied that the trip was producing the results it was meant to produce. He also traveled. The training trip gave him movement across a wider portion of the shinobi world than he had previously had access to, and he used every interval of independent time it offered with a focus that Jiraiya did not fully account for. He studied the populations of the countries they moved through. He found the ones whose life force had the quality he had been refining his ability to identify ever since the early experiments. Not all of them were shinobi. Many of them were not. Farmers, merchants, craftspeople, travelers moving between settlements for reasons that had nothing to do with weapons or techniques. Ordinary people in whom the ki lay dormant and whose constitution was strong enough to survive its awakening. He seeded them carefully. He learned, over time, to calibrate the seeding with a precision that the early experiments had lacked. He could now plant the ki in someone during a conversation, through a handshake, through the casual touch of someone passing close by. He did not need extended contact or deliberate stillness anymore. He had become efficient enough that it happened in the space between a greeting and a goodbye, invisible to every observation available in this world's toolkit. He kept the threads. Every person he seated remained connected to him at a level below their own awareness, a fine filament of ki running between them and its source, like roots from a tree reaching toward water. He could feel all of them, the warmth distributed across the landscape of the shinobi world, growing in number and in intensity as the months passed. He also noticed something he had not anticipated. The devotion, as it grew in his chosen, flowed back. Not physically, not in any way that could be observed or measured by someone without his particular sensitivity. But the quality of energy that his chosen directed toward him, the focus of their loyalty, their attachment, their growing certainty that he was something unlike anything they had ever encountered, that energy fed back along the filaments. He felt it arrive in him as something that had no precise name. A deepening, a widening of the space he occupied, as if the weight of their faith was adding something to him that he had not been carrying before. He was becoming more than he had arrived as. This interested him. He thought about it carefully, on the nights when Jiraiya was elsewhere and he was alone with the dark countryside and the 1,000 points of warmth that represented his chosen scattered across the world. He turned the mechanics of it over in his mind. He was not in this world what he had been in the last one. In the last one he had been fully divine, complete, occupying the full extent of his power from a body and an existence designed for it. Here he was a fragment in a mortal vessel, growing back toward what he had been through, a process that was both slower and stranger than he would have designed if given the choice. But the direction was clear. Each person who received the key and survived and grew in it was extending him. Each act of faith directed toward him was fuel. He was building, through the patient accumulation of chosen individuals, a network of divine energy distributed through the world in human form, anchored to him, growing toward him, and feeding him in return. He found this logical. He found it appropriate. It was, in the end, what gods had always required. Not worship in the hollow ceremonial sense that human religious practice usually produced. Genuine alignment, genuine recognition. The chosen did not know what they were building. They simply found themselves certain that Naruto Uzumaki was something they would do anything for, and they went on living their lives with that certainty operating in the background of everything they did. He met Sasuke on 8 separate occasions during the training trip, each one carefully arranged through the shadow clone system and Sasuke's own growing sensitivity to the key connection between them, which meant Sasuke knew when Naruto was close in a way he could not explain and moved toward it the way plants move toward light. They met in border towns and forest clearings and once on a rooftop in rain country during a downpour, and Naruto watched the transformation in Sasuke accumulate with the satisfaction of something going precisely as intended. The rage was becoming direction. The grief was becoming silence. The obsessive tunneling toward Itachi was widening into something that encompassed more of the world, that could hold more of the world, that looked at Naruto and found in him an organizing principle that did not require the constant maintenance of pain to sustain. On the 4th meeting, Sasuke said, without preamble, that he had been thinking about whether Itachi deserved what he wanted to give him. Naruto let the silence sit before responding. "What did you decide?" he said. Sasuke was quiet for a while. "I don't know yet," he said. "But I used to be certain. I was always certain. Being uncertain is different from being weak," Naruto said. Sasuke looked at him across the rainy gap between them. "I know," he said. "That's the strange part." Naruto said nothing further. He let the silence hold what needed to be held. He felt the ki in Sasuke responding to proximity the way it always did when they were close, brightening, becoming more active, like an ember near a larger fire. He would not tell Sasuke what was happening. He would not need to. He returned to Konoha in the spring of the year he turned 15, and Jiraiya arrived separately, and the village received them with the particular warmth that Konoha reserved for people returning from long absence. There were people who were genuinely happy to see him, which he noted with the same quality of attention he gave everything. Aruka at the ramen stand, Kakashi's chocolate 2 rooftops over adopting the slightly warmer quality it got when something he had invested in was doing well. He walked through the village and felt the difference between when he had left and now. Felt the ki he had placed in Tsunade, dormant and growing at its own pace, felt Sasuke's connection pulling toward him from across the village, felt the hundreds of chosen distributed across the world beginning to pulse slightly brighter in response to his return, as though even at distance they could feel that something had shifted. He requested a meeting with the 5th Hokage. He sat across the desk from Tsunade Senju in the Hokage's office, and he looked at her and she looked at him, and he could see her reading the change in him, the physical changes of 2.5 years, but also something she could not name, a quality she was registering without having a word for. He let her look, then he spoke. He told her, calmly and without drama, that what was coming was not what she expected. That the world they were currently managing, the system of villages and politics and carefully maintained balances of power, was not a stable structure. It was a temporary configuration of pain distributing itself across political borders. He told her that humanity had demonstrated, consistently and without exception, that left to its own governance it would produce exactly what it had always produced. Wars, children turned into weapons, power pooled in the hands of people who did not deserve it and wielded against people who had no recourse. He told her that divine judgment was arriving, not as punishment, as correction. Tsunade looked at him across the desk, and her face was doing several things at once, and her chakra had the particular quality of someone hearing something that frightened them but that they could not dismiss the way they would dismiss something obviously wrong, because it was not obviously wrong. It was landing with a weight that came from somewhere other than argument. He told her she should not worry about herself. She was part of his plan. He said it simply, without threat, without the quality of a warning. The way you tell someone something true. Her chakra spiked. "What does that mean?" she said. He stood. He looked at her for a moment. He felt the key inside her, placed there months ago without her knowledge, growing in the particular way it grew in people whose constitutions were naturally strong, steadily and without rupture. building itself a home in the architecture of someone who had the vitality of the Senju blood and decades of medical mastery to draw on. She had been changing for months. She did not know it yet. She would. It means exactly what it sounds like, he said. He left the office. Behind him he felt Jiraiya, who had been standing near the wall and who had been extremely still for the last several minutes of the conversation, and whose chakra was not calm. Jiraiya's chakra had the quality of a man who had spent 2.5 years watching something develop at the edge of his understanding and had just seen enough of the shape of it to know that his concerns had been pointing in the correct direction and that this was considerably more serious than he had allowed himself to fully believe. He felt the old man's eyes on his back. He did not turn around. He walked out of the Hokage tower and into the morning of the village, and he moved through it with the ease of someone who had grown up in its streets, past the ramen stand and the memorial stone and the training grounds in the market. And no one who saw him saw anything other than what they expected to see, which was a tall, blonde 15-year-old who had come back from a training trip and was looking at his home village with a particular expression of someone glad to have returned to something familiar. Then he walked out of the village gates. Sasuke found him on the road 3 hours later, which meant Sasuke had known he was leaving before the gates had fully closed behind him, had felt the absence, and had followed. He stood on the road and looked at Naruto with his new quality of stillness and said nothing. Naruto looked back at him. "Not yet," he said. "Stay, be useful where you are. I will call for you when it is time." Sasuke held his gaze for a long moment. Something moved through his expression that was neither the old rage nor the old grief nor anything else Naruto had seen in him before. Something closer to what a person looks like when they have found the truest version of a direction they have been moving in their whole life and have accepted it completely. He nodded. He went back. Within a week, the village understood that Naruto had left and was not returning on any timetable that anyone had been informed of. Kakashi was given the information that he had simply walked out, which Kakashi received with a quality of concern that had weight behind it. Sakura cried, which Naruto knew because the key he had placed in Tsunade let him feel the edges of the conversations happening in the office, not the words but the emotional signatures. She had not expected this. None of them had expected this, which meant they had not been fully paying attention to who he was, which meant they had been successfully deceived for years, which meant the performance had done what it needed to do. He moved through the world. He moved through fire country and wind country and water country and the border regions of the smaller countries that did not have their own villages and existed in the spaces between the great nations as places where the shinobi power structures cast long shadows but did not directly administer. He called them, not with words, not with any technique that would register on a chakra sensor. He sent the call along the filaments, the threads of ki connecting him to each of his chosen, a pulse of intention that arrived in them the way a certainty arrives, below the level of thought, the kind of knowing that bypasses argument because it does not arrive through language. They did not receive a command. They received a direction. They received a knowledge, in a frequency that their bodies understood before their minds could process it, that something was pulling them. Something was asking them to come. He stood on a hill in the no man's land between the borders of 3 countries and he felt them begin to move. Not Gaara. Garo was in the sand village and had the weight of leadership and the responsibility of a people, and the key in him was strong enough that he would understand, without being told, that his role was to stay and be what he was and be ready. Not Sasuke. Sasuke was in Konoha, growing, waiting with the quality of someone who did not doubt that the moment they were waiting for would arrive. Not Tsunade, who was still in her office and would not know, not consciously, not yet, that the thing he had placed in her was already rewriting the way she saw the world. The others. From the east, a former samurai from the land of iron who had received the key during a chance encounter on a trading road 14 months ago, who had woken that morning with an absolute certainty about where he needed to be. From the south, a fisherman from the coastal towns below the fire country border who had never held a weapon in his life but whose life force had been the strongest Naruto had encountered in the first year of his experiments, whose ki had grown to a point where he had noticed his own hands doing things that could not be explained by physical strength alone. From the west and from the north and from the scattered Middlelands, they came. Shinobi who had left their posts without filing paperwork and without saying goodbye. Civilians whose families would wake in the morning and find the bed empty. Former soldiers, children of old bloodlines, people in whom ordinary life had always felt like wearing a coat cut for someone else's measurements, who had been waiting without knowing they were waiting for a direction that fit. They came toward him along roads and through forests and across water, drawn by something that was not sound and not vision but that their bodies recognized with a certainty that conversation could not have produced. Naruto stood on his hill and felt them coming. He felt the warmth of each connection brightening as the distance closed. Felt the accumulated faith of hundreds of people who had spent months carrying a certainty they could not explain, directing it toward him, and felt that faith arrived in him the way it always arrived now, deepening him, widening him, adding something to what he was. He was not complete yet. He was still building, still gathering, still growing back toward the fullness of what he had been before the erasure had scattered him. But he was further along than when he had arrived in this world. Far further. He stood on the hill as the light faded and the stars came out over the borderlands and the world below him moved in the dark, moving toward him, and he was still uncertain, impatient, the way that things are patient when they have already seen the end from the beginning and are simply waiting for the distance between now and then to close. He looked out at the world. He found it small. He found it, still, in need of correction. He found himself, for the first time since arriving in it, ready to begin. Time skip. The name spread faster than fire. It moved the way all things move when they carry the weight of something genuinely unprecedented, not through official channels or organized communication but through the irregular, unstoppable flow of human fear finding its way from mouth to mouth, village to village, across borders that had always been maintained by the assumption that the things on the other side of them were known quantities. Lord Naruto, the divine judge, he walks where he chooses and nothing stops him, and the people who were around him yesterday are not the same people they were before. The chosen spread the name deliberately, not loudly, not with the urgency of missionaries trying to convert the resistant, but quietly, in the way that genuinely certain people speak about things they are certain of. They filtered into every corner of the shinobi world and the civilian world beyond it, into market towns and border outposts and the quiet inland communities that had never directly experienced war but had always lived in its shadow. They carried themselves differently now. The key in them had been growing for months in some cases, years in others, and it showed in the quality of how they moved and how they spoke and how they occupied space. There was a stillness to them that other people found difficult to look directly at and difficult to look away from. They said his name like a frequency, and Naruto moved through the world. He had changed. This was visible in a way that his previous changes had not been. Those carefully managed interior transformations that he had kept hidden beneath the surface of a performance. This was exterior. This was deliberate. He had stopped performing. He had grown during the months of gathering, fed by the returning devotion of hundreds of chosen until the key that had arrived in this world as a fragment had built itself back towards something approaching its full expression. He wore it now the way he wore the change in his clothing, openly, without apology. The white and violet and black of Zamasu's divine garments had replaced everything else. The material not of this world's weaving but manifested from ki itself, present because he willed it present, because a god moving through a world in the jacket and sandals of a village jinnin was a contradiction that no longer served any purpose. The halo came first as light and then as form. It appeared behind him in the way that divine markers appear, not as something added to what was already there but as something that had always been present becoming visible. A ring of sacred geometry floating at the level of his shoulders, luminous with the particular cold radiance of divine ki, turning slowly with the patience of something that measured time in different units than mortals did. Those who saw it for the first time found themselves unable to immediately explain what they were looking at. Their minds reached for categories and found none that fit. His hair, once the yellow of his father's bloodline, had gone white. Not the white of age, the white of something burning so cleanly that color was beside the point. He walked through the world and the world felt him coming. The land of rain was the first deliberate demonstration. He chose it with care. The hidden rain village, a megacure, had been under the authority of pain for years, which meant it had been under the authority of Naruto Uzumaki, the last surviving student of Jiraiya's first attempt to plant hope in a country that had been used as a battlefield for the larger nation's ambitions for generations. Naruto had taken the tools Jiraiya gave him and built from them a theology of suffering, a philosophy that held that only through inflicting equivalent pain could the world be made to understand what it had done. The 6 paths of pain were his answer to a world that had not listened when spoken to, a distributed body that he inhabited like a puppeteer inhabiting 6 instruments simultaneously, each one a former comrade whose corpse had been converted into a weapon of divine punishment. Naruto walked into the rain and let the village feel him arrive. The response was immediate. Pain was not careless. The 6 bodies deployed in the formation that had dismantled Konoha, coming from multiple vectors simultaneously, the Diva path leading, the other 5 arranged in the precise tactical geometry that had made them functionally unstoppable by any conventional shinobi response. Naruto looked at them. He looked at the Diva path, and threw it at the diminished man sitting in the tower at the village's heart, and he acknowledged what he was looking at. and Uzumaki, like him. A person who had arrived at a conclusion about the world's worthiness through a path built entirely of grief, who had chosen the role of God from the bottom up rather than from the top down, and whose version of divine authority was small and personal and corroded with pain. He did not find it beneath contempt. He found it, in its way, comprehensible. It did not change what needed to happen. The Diva Path sent the first attack, Shinra Tensai, the repulsion technique that pushed everything away from its user with a force calibrated to level buildings. It was one of the most powerful techniques in the Elemental Nation's known catalog. It moved Naruto's hair slightly. He extended his right arm and formed the God Split Cut. It emerged from his forearm as it always did, but it was not the thin, careful blade he had practiced on rooftops in the dark as a 12-year-old. It was the full expression of the technique, a blade of divine ki that extended a meter past his fingers, violet-edged and cold with a light that the rain around it bent slightly away from, as though even water understood what it was adjacent to. It made no sound. It existed in a register slightly outside this world's physics, imposing its reality on the space it occupied rather than participating in the space's existing rules. He moved through the 6 paths. The animal path deployed summons, creatures of enormous scale and genuine destructive capability, and he dissolved them before they finished forming, the Keyblade meeting each one with the precision of something that did not need to estimate. The Praetor Path, designed to absorb chakra, reached for him and found nothing it recognized, because what he was channeling was not chakra, and the absorption technique had no mechanism for processing what it could not categorize, and the path went still as the key moved through it and the body that housed it stopped. The Naraka Path, the human path, he moved between them with a speed that came from having no uncertainty about where he needed to be, each motion economical, each strike placed with the precision of judgment rather than the improvisation of combat. These were not fights, they were closings, accounts being settled. The Diva Path attempted the Chibaku Tensai at full power, the planetary devastation technique that created a gravitational singularity capable of pulling the landscape itself upward and compressing it into a sphere of raw matter. The sky darkened, the earth began to crack. Naruto looked up at the forming sphere, the weight of stone and soil beginning to gather above him, and he raised one hand. He released the ki outward, not focused into a blade or a blast, simply outward, from every surface of him simultaneously, and the divine energy met the gravitational force and the gravitational force unraveled. The sphere fell apart, the stones dropped back to the earth in pieces and the rain filled the space where they had been, and then there was quiet. He stood in the rain and looked at the Diva Path. The body was down. He looked toward the tower. Conan met him before he reached the door. She came through the air on her paper wings, the 1,000 white sheets of her technique holding her above the ruined courtyard, and she looked at him with eyes that were doing something he had not seen in a long time. Full recognition. She was not afraid of him, or not primarily. She was looking at something she had been prepared for, or thought she had been prepared for, and was finding the reality of it different from the preparation. He had met her once, briefly, on the training trip, a crossing of paths in a border town near the rain country's edge, an encounter that had lasted perhaps 20 minutes. She had not known who he was. He had felt her immediately, the quality of her ki reservoir, the strength of it, the particular density of someone who had survived things that by any reasonable accounting should have ended them and had arrived at the far side of those things carrying the weight of them without being destroyed by it. He had placed the seed then, a small one, carefully calibrated, designed to grow slowly and without disruption to her existing sense of herself. It had grown. She descended. She looked at him for a long moment, and he watched the internal negotiation happening behind her eyes, the final resolution of something that had been building in her for months, a certainty pressing upward from below her thinking. Then she walked to the door of the tower. She opened it. She went inside. He followed. Nagato was there, diminished, the renegade still present in the hollowed architecture of his face, the machinery that powered the 6 paths keeping him technically alive in a way that was more maintenance than living. He looked at Naruto through the renegade's perception, and his expression was the one that genuinely perceptive people got when they looked at Naruto now. The reaching for a category, the failure to find one. He opened his mouth to speak. Conan put a blade of compressed paper through his back before the first word arrived. She did it cleanly. She had made her decision before she came through the door, possibly before she came through the air. The paper blade retracted and she stepped back and she dropped to her knees in the quiet of the tower room and she bowed. And the quality of it was not submission in the diminished sense. It was the quality of someone who had finally found the direction they had been trying to find for years and was, for the first time, moving in it without resistance. Naruto looked at the back of her bowed head. He acknowledged her. He felt her ki brighten in response. He looked at Nagato, whose account was now fully closed, and he felt the absence of the renegade's particular energy and noted the silence of it. He turned and walked out of the tower into the rain, and Conan rose and followed, and the village of Omegakure stood in the rain around them and was very still. The nations understood that something fundamental had changed. They understood it the way animals understand weather before it arrives, not through articulation but through the deep registers of instinct that evolution had built into things that needed to survive. The reports came to every cage through the standard intelligence channels, and the intelligence channels were, for the first time in years, telling them all the same thing, which was that a coordinated, organized, spreading phenomenon was moving across the elemental nations, and that at its center was a name they all recognized. Naruto Uzumaki, missing since his return from the training trip, reported in the Land of Rain, reported in the border regions of 3 countries simultaneously, which was impossible for one person and was therefore not one person. An army, followers, people who had abandoned their posts and their villages and their lives without warning and gathered around him. Shinobi and civilians together, former enemy nin and former allies. The standard categories, the ones that had organized the shinobi world's understanding of itself for generations, were not holding. The Raikage, called the meeting at the Land of Iron because the Land of Iron was neutral territory and because neutral territory was the only ground on which people who had spent years maintaining military readiness against each other could sit in the same room without the room becoming a battlefield. Tsunade came. She had been different for months, in ways that her advisors had been noticing and discussing in lowered voices. Not incapable, not diminished, but changed in quality. A certain new stillness had entered her that had not been there before. A quality of seeing things from a distance that had not been in her before. She had been making decisions that were more patient than her typical decision-making, that seemed to account for longer timeframes, that could not always be traced back to the logic of immediate political pragmatics. She sat at the table in the Land of Iron and she looked at the other leaders assembled there, and she felt, with a clarity that the ki had been building in her for months, the full shape of what this meeting was. These were people who had decided to stand against something they did not understand. The Raikage spoke with the controlled force of someone who had never learned to be anything other than the largest energy in the room. He spoke about coordinated military response, about the Jinchuriki assets each village still controlled, about the alliance framework that the Fourth Great War had established and that could be reactivated. He spoke about Naruto Uzumaki as a threat to be neutralized. Tsunade looked across the table at him. She had not intended to make a decision in this room. She had told herself she was coming to observe, to understand the other nations' positions, to bring back intelligence. She had told herself she was still the 5th Hokage with obligations to a village. She felt the ki in her, which was not small anymore, which had been growing for a year and a half in the strongest living body in the elemental nations, and she understood what it was telling her. Not in words, in the way that things are understood when they are below language. She stood. The Raikage paused mid-sentence. She moved. She had been one of the most physically capable shinobi alive for decades, and the ki had added something to that capability that she was still learning the dimensions of. She was across the table before the sentence fully registered, and the first blow carried the compression of both her natural strength and the divine energy behind it, and the Raikage was built like a mountain and it did not matter. She moved through the room with the efficiency of someone whose uncertainty had resolved into direction. Goro was already in position outside the building. He had received the call weeks ago, the pulse along the filament, and he had come with a small contingent of sand shinobi who were also chosen, who had been gathering in the Sand Village's upper command structure over the months since his Cascade appointment. He had crossed into the Land of Iron and he was waiting, and when he felt Tsunade's movement inside the building he moved too. Onoki, the Tsuchikage, came through a window meeting Kara's sand at altitude, and the old man was genuinely remarkable. The dust release technique activating with the reflexes of someone who had been fighting since before most of the people in this story were born. The dust release reduced matter to its molecular components. Against anything in the standard toolkit of elemental ninjutsu, it was functionally unanswerable. The ki simply did not participate in the categories the technique operated within. Gaara took him down without damage that would be permanent. He was not in the business of unnecessary endings. That calculation was Naruto's to make, not his. Mei Terumi, the Mizukage, was the most tactically careful of the assembled leaders, which meant she had positioned herself near the exit before anything began, and she moved the moment the room shifted. She was fast and she was intelligent, and her combination of lava release and boil release made her genuinely dangerous to anything made of matter. She was backed against the wall of the corridor outside by 2 of the chosen before she reached the exit, and she made the assessment that any good shinobi makes when the numbers are irrevocably against them, and she stopped. They did not kill her. She was knocked unconscious with precision, and she would wake later in a different world than the one she had gone to sleep in, and she would have decisions to make. The room in the Land of Iron was quiet. Tsunade stood in it and felt the full weight of what she had just done, and felt the key bright and certain in her, and felt, beneath the fullness of it, the last remnant of the woman who had spent decades building walls against hope, looking at what she had become and finding she did not entirely recognize it. She walked outside into the clean, cold air of the Land of Iron. She looked at Gaara across the courtyard. He looked back at her. 2 Jinchuriki, the last Sendu, the most powerful medical shinobi in the world. Changed, aligned, moving in the same direction with the certainty of things that had been pointed there for long enough that the pointing had become the whole truth of what they were. She breathed the cold air. She waited for the next instruction. Sasuke found Itachi in the ruins of what had been a meeting point, an abandoned building on the border of the fire and lightning countries where Itachi had apparently been waiting with the patience that Uchiha who lived long enough developed, the stillness of someone who was always expecting something to arrive. He looked older than the last time Sasuke had seen him. Not physically. Itachi had always looked like time was spending him rather than the reverse. But something in the quality of his stillness had changed. He was carrying something with him that was not quite grief and not quite resolution, and existed somewhere between them in the territory that people inhabit when they have understood something about themselves that they cannot undo. He looked at Sasuke. His eyes went to the quality that was different in Sasuke now, the thing that registered on the Sharingan's perception as something that should not be there, a frequency in Sasuke's chakra that did not match anything in Itachi's accumulated catalog of what chakra was supposed to be and do. "What happened to you?" Itachi said. Not a question. Sasuke looked at his older brother. He felt, at a distance, the faint warmth of the key connection running between him and Naruto, a constant low hum that had become as natural as breathing over the years it had been growing in him. He felt the question of what to do with Itachi with that warmth present, running it through the framework that the key had built in the space where the rage had been. The rage had said, destroy him, make him understand through the medium of equal suffering, make his last moment be the knowledge of what he had cost. What was there now said something simpler and more complete. He was not important anymore. Not in the way of dismissal, in the way of genuine reckoning. Itachi had made a decision in a situation with no good choices, had chosen the option that preserved the most of what he valued at the cost of everything else, and had spent the years since carrying that cost in the way that Uchiha carried things, which was silently and completely and without putting it down. He was not a monster. He was a person who had done something irreversible in a situation that was already broken before he arrived in it. None of that mattered anymore. The world he had done it in was ending. The context that had given his action its meaning was closing. The village he had preserved and the people he had preserved it for and the systems that had demanded the sacrifice in the first place were all folding into a new configuration that had no space for the old grievances. Sasuke looked at his brother. Itachi's eyes searched his face for the person he had left behind and found something else there, something complete and closed in a way the young Sasuke had never been. He moved. He had always been fast. The Mangekyo Sharingan was active before the motion finished. The techniques he reached for were the ones he had been refining since before Sasuke's memories began, perfected over decades of solo practice. Sasuke was faster. The ki gave speed a different character. It was not simply quicker movement through space. It was the reduction of the gap between intention and arrival to something approaching zero. He was inside Itachi's technique before the technique resolved, and the blow he landed carried the compression of years of growing divine energy, and it was precise and it was final. Itachi fell. He felt the way things fall when they have been carrying a weight for a long time and are finally set down, without drama, almost with a quality of completion. Sasuke stood over him and felt the account close. He felt nothing about it that required processing. He waited a moment to confirm this. Then he turned and walked in the direction of the warmth. The nation sent everything they had. This was expected and it did not change the math. The shinobi alliances that had been built during the Fourth Great War were reactivated and the Jinchuriki assets were deployed and the sealing techniques that had been developed for precisely this kind of extreme threat were prepared. There were genuinely capable people in the forces that assembled. Veterans of the war, cage-level combatants who had survived things that would have ended most and arrived at the far side of those things stronger. They fought with everything they had, and they fought with the desperation of people who understood that the thing they were fighting was not a conventional threat and that conventional responses were probably not going to be sufficient, and who fought anyway because the alternative was not fighting. Naruto's army met them. The Chosen, now numbering in the thousands, carried the key in varying degrees of development, some of them only beginning to access it, some of them, the older ones, the ones seated earliest, now operating at levels that placed them well beyond what standard chakra training could produce. They moved through the coalition forces with the particular efficiency of people who were not afraid, not because they had been trained not to be afraid, but because the key had reorganized their understanding of what there was to be afraid of, which was nothing they were currently facing. The battles were significant. The shinobi world had spent generations producing capable fighters, and they were capable and they fought well, and it was not enough. It was not enough because the thing leading the army was not a shinobi. It was not enough because what Naruto was, by the time the final battles came, was something that the elemental nations had no word for and no precedent for and no toolkit designed to address. He moved through the coalition's strongest forces and let them see him clearly for the first time. He let the divine presence radiate without restraint. He had been managing it, containing it, keeping it calibrated to what the situation required. Now the situation required something different. The halo behind him was fully visible, the geometry of it precise and unhurried, turning with the certainty of something that did not need to perform its authority because it was its authority. His white hair moved in an energy that was not wind. His eyes were the green that Zamasu's eyes had been, that particular shade that existed at the intersection of divine fury and divine peace, completely calm and completely implacable. The god split cut in his hand was no longer a weapon in any sense that the word weapon captured. It was the distillation of judgment made edge. It was the conclusion of a logic that had been building since before this body was born. He used the techniques that had no names in this world. Divine retribution came in blasts from his free hand, that particular golden black energy that Zamasu had wielded, now fully his, fully integrated, the divine key of a god who had rebuilt himself from a fragment up and arrived at something that was not the original only in the way that a river is not the source spring, larger, wider, more fully itself than the beginning had been. He moved through forces that numbered in the thousands, and he did not stop and he did not slow, and the ones he did not reach, his chosen, reached behind him. He came to the center of the final coalition position and he stopped. He looked at what remained. He thought about the 12-year-old sitting on a bench at dawn watching a village find a way to still be standing. He thought about 12 years old is not what I was. I was something older and larger, and the bench in the village and the performance were always temporary, always the interval before this. He rose into the sky. The seal formed above him. It was something beyond the sealing techniques of this world's tradition, something that accessed the full architecture of 6 paths chakra combined with divine key in a configuration that had no scroll, no manual, no teacher who had demonstrated it. He constructed it from first principles and from the memory of things he had known before the fragment, from the vast and certain knowledge that existed below language in the place where gods keep the things they understand. The halo expanded. It left him and rose above him, growing as it rose, the sacred geometry multiplying outward until it was not a ring but a framework, a structure of divine light that covered the sky above the elemental nations like a second firmament, complex and precise and completely, utterly still at its center while its edges moved with a slow, inexorable turning. He looked out from where he hung in the air above the world and he saw it for what it was. A finite space filled with finite things doing finite damage to each other across finite time. A stage that had been used for long enough, a system that had produced enough evidence. He pressed the seal downward. The beams came from every point of the halo's geometry simultaneously, not heat and not concussion, but something more fundamental, something that addressed the life force rather than the body, that reached into the thing which animated matter and undid the animating. They fell across the landscape in the way light falls, total and without preference, covering what was below them completely. It was not instantaneous. It took time, the way large things take time. He held it while it worked and he felt each extinguishing the way you feel rain on a large body of water, individually and collectively simultaneously. Each one a completion, each cluster of them a silence replacing what had been noise. Those who had been chosen felt nothing. The key in them was the thing that addressed the life force, and the key recognized its own. They stood in the light and were not touched by it and looked up at the sky and understood, in the way the chosen understood things, that this was what had always been coming. The world below was quiet. He held the seal open until he was certain, and then he let it close and the halo returned to him and he descended. He stood for a moment on the ground that was now very still. He felt the outline of the remaining living energy in this world. His chosen, gathered, a warmth distributed through the silence like stars through dark. Gaara in the northwest, Tsunade, carrying the particular deep resonance of Senju vitality with the key woven fully through it. Conan, whose paper light presence was distinctive, Sasuke, moving toward him from the east, that cold clean quality of someone who had arrived fully at what they were going to be. Thousands of others, from every country, every background, every original purpose, all converged toward him or already arrived, gathered in the way that things gather when the reason for being elsewhere has been removed. He turned his attention upward and inward. He felt the seal. He had known it was there since the early years of his power. He had felt it the way you feel a room behind a locked door, the particular quality of contained energy pressing against a barrier from the other side. He had known what it was, or known enough of its shape to understand its general function. A dimensional ceiling placed by the Sage of Six Paths and his brother Hamura to contain something that was not meant to be accessed by the world it was stored in. Kaguya Otsutsuki, the mother of all chakra in this world, the original source from which the sage himself had inherited his power, the beginning of the chain that ended in every shinobi who had ever held their hands in the seal position and pushed their will through their body as visible force. She was old in a way that made Naruto's own age seem recent, old in the way that things are old when they predate the categories humans use to measure age. He formed the keyblade at a different scale. He extended it not as a weapon meant for a body but as a key meant for a lock, pressing it into the dimensional seal with a precision that required him to understand the architecture he was opening rather than simply forcing through it, and the seal that had held Kaguya's dimension closed against the physical world for generations responded to the divine key the way all barriers eventually respond to something that does not operate by their rules. It opened. The dimension on the other side was white, not the white of light or snow but the white of absolute zero, of perfect emptiness rendered as color. It was vast in the way of spaces that do not have edges, extending in every direction without reference point, and it had the quality of a space that had been alone for a very long time and had not improved from the solitude. She was there. Kaguya Otsutsuki was immense in her full form, the pale face in the horn and the Rinne Sharingan and the chakra so dense and ancient it pressed on the space around it the way very large objects press on the fabric of what contains them. She looked at him the way she had presumably looked at everything that had ever entered her dimension uninvited, with the absolute cold authority of something that had never been seriously threatened and was not currently revising that assessment. She moved, the dimensions shifted, the technique she had used against the ones who had sealed her, the ability to fold space and relocate conflict to different environments instantaneously, dropping from white emptiness into a landscape of boiling lava and then into a gravity-reversed tundra and then into a sea of chocolate water that burned at contact with most living things. Naruto moved with her through all of it. He was not a shinobi responding to an environment. He was not reading the landscape and adjusting tactics. He was simply there, in each dimension she reached for, already present when she arrived, occupying the space with the particular certainty of something that did not locate itself by reference to its surroundings but existed independent of them. She hit him with the full expression of her chakra, the bone techniques, the absorbing black spheres, the infinite Tsukuyomi at its unfiltered scale. He walked through it the way he had walked through Chibaku Tensei over the reign of Emegakure. The divine key was not a stronger version of her power. It was a different category of thing. She was reaching for him with the most powerful tools available in the lexicon of this world's energy, and what he was ran perpendicular to that lexicon. He took her down through patience and precision and the absolute absence of the urgency that combat usually required, because urgency was a product of uncertainty and he did not have uncertainty about this outcome. When she was still, he placed his hands on her, not to end her. That was not what this was. He pressed the key into her the way he had pressed it into Gaara and Sasuke and all the chosen, but differently. Not a seed, something more like a question being put to something very large. He let the key move through the whole architecture of her existence, through the Otsutsuki bloodline and the divine tree's accumulated knowledge and the Ten Tails legacy running through her and the 10,000 years of isolation that had reduced the beginning of chakra in this world to something ancient and bitter and alone. He read her. He read everything she knew about the wider universe. The Otsutsuki civilizations reach across dimensions and planets. The chakra fruit and the divine trees planted on worlds and harvested and replanted on new worlds in the slow, vast agricultural logic of a civilization that measured expansion across cosmic time. The scale of it opened in him like a map unfolding that was larger than the table it was being unfolded on. He sat with this knowledge, this world, the elemental nations, the entirety of what he had been born into and grown through and judged, was one location in something much larger. a single field in a landscape that went on past the edge of any horizon available from inside it. And the things moving through that landscape, the Otsutsuki and whatever moved behind them, were operating at scales that made the shinobi world's understanding of power look like children arguing over stones. He found this clarifying. His purpose had never been limited to the elemental nations. He had always known this, in the way that fragments of gods know things before they have the vocabulary to articulate them. The divine judgment he was carrying was not addressed to one world. It was not addressed to one civilization or one set of failures. It was addressed to everything that had failed to be what it was supposed to be, everything that had taken the gift of existence and converted it into the ongoing production of suffering and smallness and waste. Everything. He stood in Kaguya's wide dimension and he made the decision that had been building since before this body was born. He withdrew the key from Kaguya and she lay still in the white space, not destroyed, not ended. Contained, he placed a seal of his own design over the dimension and closed it from the outside, and it would not be opened by anything that did not carry what he carried. He returned to the world. His chosen were gathered. They stood on the open ground where the final battle had been, thousands of them, the whole reach of his years of patient seeding assembled in one space, and they looked at him and their faces had the quality of things that had found their center of gravity. They were not afraid, they were not confused, they were oriented, they were pointed toward him the way planets are pointed toward the thing they orbit, not by force but by the deep physics of what they were in relation to what he was. Sasuke was there, and Gaara, and Tsunade, and Konan, and all the thousands of others who had been found along the roads and in the border towns and in the quiet places where people who were worth finding tended to end up. He looked at all of them. He thought about the first morning, the apartment, the dark, the first awareness that the world he had arrived in was small and broken and that something needed to be done about it. He thought about the long middle of it, the performance, the patience, the careful accumulation of understanding and power and purpose. He thought about the end of it, the quiet of the world below, the silence that was not emptiness but completion. He raised his arms. The key moved through all of them simultaneously. Not a seed now, the full expression of it. The final step in a process that had been building since the first experiments outside the village walls years ago, the completion of what those seeds had been growing toward. He felt each of them receive it and receive it and receive it until there was no space between what they were and what the key was, until the distinction between chosen and divine stopped being a distinction and became a continuum. They change, not violently, not in the dramatic way of transformations in this world, with the tearing sound and the chocolate surge and the visible battle between the old form and the new one. They changed the way light changes when the last of what was blocking it is removed. They became what they had been growing toward, each of them, the key taking its full place in the architecture of their existence and revealing through its full presence what they had always had the capacity to be. They rose. It began as a lifting, as the divine energy in enough human bodies achieved the threshold at which matter became optional rather than mandatory, and they left the ground, and the golden light that gathered around each of them was not reflected from anywhere but generated, intrinsic, the particular luminosity of things that have been purified down to what they fundamentally are. From the air they were visible against the sky like a field of stars displaced from their usual positions, thousands of points of white and gold above the broken ground of the elemental nations. He rose among them. He looked down at the world below him one final time. It was very still, the great countries of the hidden villages and the roads between them and the rivers that had not changed while everything else changed. The stone faces on the Hokage mountain, 4 of them looking outward at a village that was quiet now in the total way that things are quiet when all the noise has stopped. The desert of the land of wind, the water of the land of waves, that bridge, still there, still crossing, still connecting one side to the other in the simple patient way of things built to last. He looked at it, he acknowledged it, he turned away. The chosen gathered around him in the sky and their light moved together the way the light of individual flames moves together when they are close enough, becoming one thing with many sources, a brilliance that expanded outward from them as they rose higher and the world below grew smaller and the sky above them opened into something larger and darker and full of more than any point within it could see from inside it. He felt the universe. It was vast in the way that the wide dimension had suggested, vast past any accounting that used the elemental nation's units of measurement, full of things happening that this world had never had access to, civilizations and destructions and the slow turning of forces that operated in time scales that made human history look like a breath held briefly. All of it flawed, all of it in need, all of it waiting, whether it knew it or not, for the correction that was coming for it. He looked out at the darkness and the stars and the unimaginable distance between them, and he felt the purpose that had survived the erasure and the rebirth and the long years of patience and performance arrive in him at its fullest, cleanest expression, not a fragment anymore, not a piece of something that had been, but the thing itself, fully present, fully certain, extending outward from him in every direction like light from a source that no distance could diminish. Behind them, the planet turned without them. Below them, the world was quiet. Ahead of them, the universe was vast and full of the particular kind of silence that exists before something inevitable arrives. Lord Naruto looked out at all of it, and he began.
So that was it. More movies and series to come. See you guys. Peace.